was looking for a place to get away today in this mid-April day. Quite breezy. And I've come to Siegenthaler Kästner Esker Preserve. I was here 2 years ago, had so much fun. I'm gonna see what else I can see today. So let's go. It's a windy day, so I might time my segments to occur when the wind dies down a little bit. I love these kind of brisk, bright, windy days though in the spring or the fall. As I walk into the preserve here, we pass through some farm fields, and I just note that this field looks like it was just planted, and as far as I can tell, that was a bean field last year, so that would likely be a cornfield this year. In the distance over there is the Kettle Lake associated with this preserve itself. It doesn't seem to hold a lot of water, but there's definitely a depression in that area, and right now I can't see much open water there, but it's probably more like a swamp. Some vultures overhead playing in that wind. And when I was here last, I came a couple weeks after this. I was in May, here in May the last time. It's mid to late April now, so I might catch more of the spring ephemerals on this trip, things I missed last time. Of course, that time the trees had leafed out quite a bit by then. But one little spring ephemeral that you can see all around here is Spring Beauty. Okay, those are carpeting this understory here. This side of the walk-in is a pasture, and there's a little part here that's wooded with hickories and hackberries and oh geez, a bunch of other things in here. And it basically carpets this whole area, the Spring Beauty. So that's one of our really early spring wildflowers, and it sticks around for quite a while. And it's still here. So I'm hopeful we'll see more of that kind of stuff as we get into this preserve. And if you recall, for those of you who might have seen my previous visit, this preserve is organized around the glacial history of Ohio. So it's called the Siegenthaler Kästner Esker Preserve. So we're going to see eskers, which are glacial features where glaciers dumped sediments, things they were carrying, rocks, sediments, in sort of like river channels, and left them behind as they melted. And so they're sort of like the inverse of a river. They're now mounds where gravel and stuff was dumped from the glacier as it melted. There are also kames here, K-A-M-E-S. Those are like single mound-like deposits of the same stuff, but a spot where that stuff collected in the glacier, and then the glacier melted and left a big pile like in a mound. Some of these have the appearance of an Indian mound, but they're actually a glacial feature. So that's what you see here at this preserve. There's a 1 mile trail system, loops around, and it's very peaceful and private. You're in an agricultural landscape with woodlots here and there, and this is a good spot to escape in the middle of all that. It's not heavily visited, it seems. There's no one here today. Of course, I'm here on a midweek visit, and that was true the last time I was here. I didn't see anybody. The trail I can see is used somewhat, so people do visit it, and I'd recommend that you do, because it's a really cool spot. So let's keep going and see the kinds of things we're going to see today. I'm skirting along the base of the esker. I'm going to get to the, I guess, kind of the northwest end of it and get on top. And the wind has died down some, so that's nice. And I'm hearing the birds pick up, and there's one in particular I'm hearing a lot, which is a real harbinger of spring, and that's the red-winged blackbird. It's in a hickory tree up here, calling once in a while. I see it. We'll see how close we can get to it, but we'll probably hear it in the background. So this is the esker. It has lots of large trees on it. I just measured a 48-inch diameter bur oak. Again, bur oak is one of these oaks. They grow pretty fast, but they get really huge. They have stout stems, big trunks, just what I like. And they are common in these kind of like, what might be like savanna-like habitats, with some large, fairly widely scattered trees, with an understory that might have been some prairie or smaller trees and things. And so here we are heading up the esker now with some big hickories, pig nuts. There's some bitternut hickories here. Bitternuts have tighter bark with narrower furrows. Pig nuts have thicker furrows. There's even some shagbark and things up in here. Walnuts, another common thing. Here's some walnuts to the left. There are pin oaks here, white oaks. I think there's some red oaks. So it's like a red oak paradise in a little spot. I think this whole preserve is about 37 acres or so. Here's a really huge bitternut hickory right here with very narrow leaflets. It has not leafed out, so we can't really look at that part. I did look at that closely the last time I was here. All right, so let me keep walking. There's the red wings in the background. Very common bird in the spring, particularly associated with wetter areas, marsh edges. There are little streams around here, the kettle ponds, some marshy areas. So this kind of habitat is just perfect for red-winged blackbirds. They're flying everywhere around here. There's one calling. Okay, let's keep going until our next highlight. In front of us there is the big bur oak that I measured, about 48 inches DBH. And there are several in that size class in this preserve. So we're up on top of the esker. This is about the high point, I believe. Right around right here. We're about 20 or 30 feet above the base of it. Okay, the pasture down there. And it's rocky, gravelly kind of soil. Ground up limestone and other things. Here's a groundhog hole. And if you look at what it has pulled out, it's very gravelly, rocky, worn down limestone. Pieces of granite here and there, okay, which came from Canada with the glaciers. That gives you an idea what the material is like underneath me right here. It's not clay, it's not dense, it's not hydric wetland soil. It's kind of drier, loose, rocky, gravelly soils. They're brought here by the glaciers and dumped. Another large bur oak. This one's leaning. It's from the top of the esker, leaning over, hanging on. I can see it's about to leaf out. It has a very full canopy. I'm not going to measure that one because it's covered by poison ivy vines that are leafing out right now. I think I bumped into a few when I measured the other spot. But that's another in the 4-foot diameter size class. There's some even bigger in the other side of this preserve. Here's a younger bur oak right here in front of me. They're known for their very thick bark, very deeply furrowed. And if you were to squeeze that tree, it'd be kind of spongy at this level, at this age. It's not really still spongy on a big one, but the young ones can kind of even feel spongy because that bark is so thick and corky. Here's some right here. Here's one right here in front of us. Oh, we have a lot of raspberries. Okay, they're leafing out. They're actually starting to show, I believe their flower buds are starting to poke out. Of course, honeysuckle is, you can't go anywhere in Ohio without running into a honeysuckle, so there's plenty of that. There is a native relative here, however, called coralberry, which is like a small version of honeysuckle with rounded leaves. So that's a good thing. I definitely have seen that in the wooded area on the way in before. But most of what you're seeing here is actually the bad honeysuckle, amber honeysuckle, Lonicera macchii. More bur oaks, hickories. Now down in this direction, the agricultural fields kind of end right here. And that you could clearly tell is a wetter area. There's a little drainage that sort of moves through there. I think they may have pastured it in the past, but it's too moist, too wet to farm. And so it's more like a marsh now, a wetland marsh. It has a lot of reed canary grass, which is a non-native grass that really likes wet soils, wetlands and wetland edges. That was one that was brought here on purpose, but it's kind of just gone crazy in native habitats like this with wetter soils. So most of that grass you're seeing down there is not native, and we do better to not have it there. All right, at this spot, you descend from one esker and then you can rise up to another. So there's kind of like two eskers with a waist here, and we're going to drop down into the waist and then rise back up because there's some really nice big trees and things on that side as well. In front of us here is a large American elm. I just stepped over and measured that one, and it's just shy, a few inches shy of 3 feet in diameter, and it's in really good health. I remember looking at this and profiling it 2 years ago, and I see it budding out very nicely, the entire canopy budding out right now. That can change quickly with elms, but at the moment this tree looks very healthy, which obviously is fairly rare for American elms to reach that size before being killed by Dutch elm disease. So this is one I've kind of had my eye on. I'm sure there are some others in these woodlots around here because it's quite nice, showing you that standard strong basal trunk and then spreading branches that rise in a vase-like shape. And that's why it was such a good street tree. So at street level, you could drive back past it along sidewalks and stuff, and the branches would arch high and arch outward and give you a lot of shade, but you wouldn't necessarily have to deal with low branches. Of course, you could train it in that way as well. That's a nice one. I showed you what the glacial deposits look like up on top of the esker that the glaciers dumped after they melted. Down here the soil has a distinctly different appearance. It's very dark and black, with a little grayish and whitish tones to it as well. This is what you'd call hydric soil. That color in this area is synonymous with wetland soils. So this is hydric soil with a high organic matter content that was formed under wetlands, essentially. The lighter appearance to parts of it is some of the limestone that's mixed in, some marl, but this whole area out here, like I said, is basically a wetland, more or less. It's very moist. Again, this is reed canary grass. That whole area, all these areas aligning these eskers would have hydric soils. I can see very black soils out there. So that's one of these wetland indicators. If you were to go out and try to identify where a wetland is, one of the things you do is look for black soils like that, hydric soils. And there you have it. As those elms died and were lost from city streets and developments and such, one of the replacements was this tree. This is a silver maple. Silver maple was planted widely in developments because these trees grow really fast. They do develop kind of that vase shape, or you can train them into the vase shape of an American elm. They're associated naturally with wetland areas. Okay, so here we are in this kind of wetland area I mentioned with a beautiful silver maple. These trees get a bad rap in, urban, suburban landscapes because they were planted everywhere, and a lot of them have reached the end of their useful life, getting rotten. I have one in my own yard that's happening too. I'm gonna have to deal with it pretty soon. But out here in nature where they're supposed to be, this one is completely healthy. Nice spreading canopy, and shows you what a beautiful silver maple can actually look like. Toward the west of the preserve, across the pasture, are also other glacial features. So that's a short esker right there. Of course, that one is being utilized. It's outside the preserve as pasture. And then there are some cames dotted on the landscape out there. We'll have to go back toward the north end to see those. But what you're seeing in front of us there, that mounded long strip of a mound, is another esker. Now we're going to rise up on this southern part of the preserve onto the esker again, and I love this view right here. As you rise up here, you're just greeted by these massive bur oaks, really gnarly, curled, gnarled branches. A lot of movement, as you say, in the bonsai world. It's really cool, this spot. So here's that thick furrowed bark of a bur oak I was talking about. Okay, very characteristic. There's a couple more. I think the biggest is this right up here. Maybe I'll try to get a measurement on that one. Probably did the last time I was here. We'll see. Here's one that's leaning quite a bit. Yeah, that's a monster. I'm gonna have to put the camera down. I'll try to get a measurement on that. I may have last time too, but I do see there's poison ivy. This one is worth the effort though. Okay, so give me a minute. Well, I got my measurement despite the poison ivy. It's 51 inches in diameter. So that's a whopper. That's over 4 feet, heading toward 4.5 feet. So these are precious, okay? And to be respected and enjoyed, come here and check them out. They're really cool. As I've risen up this side of the esker, you see those big bur oaks in the distance, surrounded by a lot of amber honeysuckle around the base. And as I proceeded farther, there's less and less amber honeysuckle. All right, there's a little bit, but it's a lot less dense. Now there's several reasons that could be, but it's curious. One, there's a lot of raspberry in here, so there's a strong competition from another shrubby sort of plant. There could have been a removal effort that removed a lot of it, and it hasn't come back into this area just strongly just yet. The other thing is there's a very high density of walnuts in this particular spot. Now, walnuts are purported to be allelopathic, meaning they have compounds that either leach from their roots or their leaves or their bark that some plants can't tolerate very well. And it could be that the simple density of walnuts might be affecting the success of amber honeysuckle up here. Now, I don't know if that's true, if those two things have ever been put together head to head in allelopathic tests, but that is one different thing. The other thing is that one thing that amber honeysuckle does not like is heavy shading. And maybe this side of the esker, once everything leaves out over here, is shadier than where we started, but I'm not sure. It's a fairly open canopy, it appears. So I don't know. It's one of those mysteries. That's what ecology is all about. Taking observations like that and trying to figure out what mechanism is causing that. Okay, and there's always a number of alternatives, and you do your best to try to test and eliminate things until you come to the closest answer you can get. Here's a possible clue. I'm seeing on this down piece of deadwood that it is charred. It's covered by charcoal. That suggests they might have run some management fires through this preserve, which again is something you would do in savannas. Again, this meets kind of the requirements of what we'd call a prairie savanna. Large trees, fairly widely spaced with understory vegetation, often prairie vegetation. Those kind of sites experience infrequent fires, and in that sense, fire is a management tool to eliminate competitors, low-lying vegetation. Amber honeysuckle, I don't believe, is very fire tolerant, so it could be that they had run fires through here in the past. I do see some cut stumps out there as well, so maybe it's the management part of things that explain the pattern we just pointed out. Something while I'm up here I see, I'm not sure I pointed out the last time, is this plant. Okay, I see a few still flowering over here in the distance. This plant, and I see it else, I've seen it elsewhere in the preserve. That plant is called golden seal. And that's a plant that has purported medicinal benefits. People would collect the root and, you know, grind it up, make tinctures out of it or whatever. I'm not sure if there's any evidence at all that it actually works. It may. I'm not sure what the tests show. But it's also one of these things where, you know, people would often find a plant or a plant part that's maybe brightly colored or looks interesting and give it medicinal benefits, whether it really had it or not. And again, I'm not sure what the studies show with golden seal, but ginseng, for example. One of the reasons ginseng was adopted as an important medicinal plant was that when you pull the root out of the ground, it kind of looks like a person. Looks like it has arms and legs. And so that, you know, was thought to imbue it with some sort of, you know, medicinal value toward humans. And it may also. There are a fair number of studies with ginseng. But again, that's also an issue because people then collect it, over-collect it, and deplete natural populations of these kinds of plants for these purported medicinal benefits that, you know, may not even be there. So, all right, before I turn around or turn back, here's a really large bur oak that's on the ground. I remember measuring that last time, I think. This one was huge. It's kind of tough to get around here. But it came down in a storm. This was down 2 years ago, probably several years before that. So that was a whopper as well, but that one is down. I see at the base of it, we have some Trillium grandiflorum, excuse me. All right, still out in pretty much its full glory, so that's nice. Some May apples in the background. And then there's a stand of bladder nut. These shrubby small trees you'd see here, you might mistake for amber honeysuckle at first, is actually a native. And they make this inflated fruit capsule with seeds inside of it. It's like a bladder. And so that's the name bladder nut. Okay. And finally, we also have some gooseberry. This plant here, that's a native as well, ribes. Okay, that would make a fruit with some seeds. Here's the flowers starting to come out. All right, so let's go in this direction. Last time I was here, I did not go in this direction. So let's see if I see anything different. Out here, we are just beyond the preserve. This is the south end of the preserve. And this woodlot here is basically a floodplain forest, bottomland forest. It's filled with silver maples. So a lot of the trees you see leafed out there are silver maples. There previously probably would have been black ash throughout here. I still see some remnant ash, American elms, things like that, green ash that like moist soils, essentially almost wetland soils. So that's a nice riparian forest, but this is outside the preserve. I'm right at the south end. All right, so here is the turn, and I'm gonna head back north, and since my battery is getting kind of low, I'll probably just hit some highlights before that runs out and sign off. Well, there's a classic spring site, robin egg. This one's cracked. I don't know if the nest was raided or it was a successful hatch, but it was just here on the trail. Robin egg blue. This patch in front of me is a pretty good stand of ashes. These are green ashes. They're pretty beaten up by emerald ash borer, but they're alive. A lot of them are actually alive. I don't know how long they'll stay alive. Parents of these things are generally gone, but some of these are reaching some decent size. So here's the feeding galleries of emerald ash borer. This is still alive, this tree, pretty beaten up, but hanging in there. Depending on what the EAB population does in this spot, they could hang around for a while, but if they build back up, they'll end up killing these things too, which is too bad. Look at these branches of bur oak. Very corky bark. It almost looks like it has a disease or something. Not all trees show this level of corkiness to their younger branches like this, but this one's pretty exceptional. With a couple of cames in the backdrop, I'm going to sign off of Siegenthaler Kestner Esker Preserve. Until next time, this is Don signing off. Bye-bye. After what I thought was the conclusion of this episode, I decided to make the short trip over to Scale, Ohio's tallest mountain, Campbell Hill. Campbell Hill is located near Bell Fountain, Ohio, and it's an anomaly. This episode in this area is really known for its glacial history. That's what the Siegenthaler Kestner Esker Preserve is all about, is displaying some of the interesting features that resulted from the glaciers moving and retreating from this area 15,000 years ago. But during those periods of glaciation, there were some hills that were relatively unscathed by the glaciers. And this area is not far away from Siegenthaler Kestner Esker Preserve, and it's called the Bell Fountain Outlier. And so this is an area of Ohio where the glaciers contacted some very resistant rock, bedrock, including some sandstones, rocks of Devonian origin. And rather than just plow these things over, the glacier basically contacted these rocks and split into two halves, two lobes that extended more south in Ohio in an eastern or more westerly direction. And so there was a set of hilltops that were basically saved from being plowed down by the glaciers. And that's again known as the Bell Fountain Outlier. And that's where Campbell Hill, the tallest mountain in Ohio, now resides. So in my last little segment here, let's take a visit to Campbell Hill. It's very windy out here, which is very appropriate to be on the tallest mountain in a particular state. So I'm on the tallest mountain in Ohio, Campbell Hill. Grand total of 1,549 feet, not even. This is just outside the town of Bell Fountain. And here's a historical marker that describes this spot. And here's the actual elevation marker. In fact, it's 1,548.81 feet. And this is a chunk of marble to commemorate the spot. There's not that much of a view, although, you know, I can see ridges quite a bit out in the distance. This is not the kind of high point that really sticks out above the surrounding territory very much that you can see from a distance. But it was still strategic. There was an installation over here. There was a radar division of the military that had a facility that operated in the 50s and 60s over here to just basically do surveillance for the US military. So there's still a museum dedicated to that over here, the National Air Defense Radar Museum, and a marker here that commemorates its years of operation from 51 to 1969. Okay, there was a squadron of the US Air Force located here, and so they used radar to look for, you know, enemy signals and things. Okay, so there's not a whole lot else to see here at Campbell Hill. There's the Ohio High Point Career Center nearby and some other little businesses and things, but this is it. It's quite windy. I can pretend I'm on Mount Everest today up here. Here you go, Campbell Hill.